Well, hey everyone, welcome to another episode of Digging Deeper. Robert here with
Brandon.
That's right, with Brandon.
Thank you.
I should have prepped you for that one.
Yeah, I didn't know my own name. It's like I think I'm Brandon.
Mr. Brandon Grant, as well as
Mr. Anthony.
Wow.
Anthony.
Brilliant
We're a lot
group of
of
men right
misters.
today.
So very formal here, but getting to a chance to dig deeper. That's what we do here on Digging Deeper on the message from yesterday that you lovingly called chipmunks.
Yep.
Now you called it
Alvin, Simon, and Theodore.
Alvin, Simon, and
Remember that?
Theodore.
Do you remember that?
Do you know about the...
Alvin.
Oh,
Okay,
okay, good.
all right.
They remade the movie.
But I know the live action,
relevant.
not the cartoon.
Okay,
I
I know
have
the
to say.
cartoon.
Very
right?
good.
And the man in the yellow hat. Is that the same thing?
No, that's
No,
Curious
that's
George.
Curious George.
Never mind. Okay. All right.
This is not about 80s and 90s cartoons. This is actually about a message that was inspired by your retreat.
Yes.
Your personal retreat to northern Montana. And there you kind of had an experience. And if you don't know this story, then go back and watch the message. But Brandon talks about how he was feeling a little uneasy because of a 2-inch tall animal.
Yeah.
I want to know
Too
what,
friendly of a chipmunk.
Yeah, what was possibly making you worried about a chipmunk? Like, what was going through your head? Like, do you think a chipmunk was going
Like-
to cuddle you too aggressively?
No,
or-
I mean, because... if you see their teeth, like they got some teeth, right?
I've
Like,
never seen their teeth, but
Rabid.
when they, I think that, and I mentioned yesterday, I think that the scene from National Lampoon's Christmas Vacation when a squirrel jumps on that guy's face, that's freaky.
You know.
And I grew up in the Midwest, and there were squirrels all over the place, and there were not friendly squirrels. They didn't like come up to you. They stayed away from you, but they can take a big old acorn and they can just with their teeth just crack it open. You're like, I'd rather that thing not
okay.
Yeah.
all right.
jump up on me and
Takes me
decide to
30
nibble
minutes
on
to
me.
get a pistachio. I don't trust those teeth.
Yeah. That thing just, if it's got teeth, it takes 1 second to get a
Yeah.
pistachio,
No
so
way.
So chipmunks, there's more than meets the eye,
I
which
guess
is
so.
kind of the point of your message. Actually,
Yes.
was that you kind of made this flash judgment on this chipmunk, and really the chipmunk was after something that you had.
Correct.
And then your application was really kind of, as Christians, there might be something that we have. And as people are drawing near to us, we can kind of stiff arm them or distance ourselves in those ways and not really realize that maybe people are just drawing near to us because they see some value in the things that are present in our lives, probably because of the presence of Jesus Christ as Christians. I want to know, have either of you ever had an experience where somebody was coming around you and was kind of drawing near, maybe even like, it's kind of weird to say, but pursuing a relationship with you, pursuing you, and you kind of felt this hesitancy. You maybe even gave them the stiff arm, and then you found out later and you said to yourself, like, oh man, they just wanted this, or this is how I should have responded instead. Is there any occurrences in your life where you look back in hindsight and you're like, man, I chipmunked, to use your own phrase, I chipmunked someone in my own life?
Anthony? I'm sure you got lots of
I
girls
got-
pursuing you.
Oh, girls. Single man,
Single
by the way.
here. Single youth pastor.
No comment.
Yes.
No comment. I think, multiple. I think I'll start probably like even before I was a Christian, but my younger brother is someone that I've chipmunked. I think I was too young and too caught up in other things that I had no concept of influence, and I had no idea that someone 4 years apart from me that's directly related to me would be watching every single thing that I did. And, and then on top of that, I had no idea that every single thing I did would impact him and set standards and kind of set the tone for him in his life. So definitely chipmunked him there. And then even after being a Christian, I can think back to my first year, or I guess my second year of college more so. We get a new batch of like freshmen in, and so I'm no longer... I guess I'm a year into my faith journey at this point, and I'm also not the new kid at the college. So now there's all these new kids, and I started to get like first years that would just be around me. Like you're saying, they would constantly be around, and my response was the exact same as you with the chipmunk, unfortunately. And it
Kicked
was
him in
like,
the face?
boom.
No.
Is that what you did?
No, but like it kind of shoot him away. And honestly, like I know we're not breaking down why necessarily yet, but
okay, you can.
I think it was insecurity. I didn't feel worthy of their pursuit of me. Like I felt like because I was only a year into this faith walk, I had nothing to offer them.
Wow.
But for some reason, every time I'd shoo them away or go to a different room, they would be there or they'd follow. And so it took me probably 4 or 5 months to understand and grasp this idea of I have an opportunity here to engage this chipmunk or these chipmunks and give them the sunflower seeds they're looking for.
Well said. Yeah. How
So
about
I've
you,
had a
Brandon?
few.
Yeah, I mean, I would say that I remember a couple kids in school, and it's interesting because I'm like now giving advice to one of my kids is in the same phenomenon, where it's a couple kids that are more shy that would love to just kind of hang and linger and be like almost you felt like your shadow,
Yeah.
and it kind of felt like annoying, you know, and you're like, why are they always following me, or why are they always trying to like make their way into this circle? But when they get into the circle, they don't say anything. They just like stay
they're just
mute,
there.
silent, you know, and
Yeah.
and so you're just like you just get frustrated. And so you're just like, you know what, I'm trying now everything I can to get away from this person. And like I said, I remember that specifically my sophomore year of high school, there was being a couple people, but the truth was, you know, a lot of it was that the crowd that I hung out with was more social, and we were in sports, and that demographic at least in high school was like, oh, you know, if I can somehow like be in that group or near that
It
group,
was a
then maybe I'll be
popular
welcome.
crowd, wasn't it?
Yeah, you know, it was a popular crowd, I guess. It's small towns, so I don't know if you're popular in a high school of
popularity
like
by
100 people,
proximity.
you know, like who cares? But I think that I definitely moved in a direction to try to get that person away versus like welcoming them. And then now having this conversation with one of my kids, it's like they're just seeing aspects of you or some of those kids that they really are longing for and just trying to be welcomed into there. And yes, even when you welcome in, they may still be really awkwardly silent for a while.
Yeah.
But it's not your place, or please don't like just exclude them and dismiss them because there's something they see that they really want that you have.
Now, I want to go back to a message that you preached a long time ago where you busted out this little Lego thing. And do you remember this one?
Yeah.
And you actually grabbed some Legos and you said, you know, there's only so many prongs on this little Lego piece for so many pieces of Lego.
Yeah.
And it's kind of like your capacity for so many relationships and friendships and things like that. And so sometimes people, I think, can start to construe that they are being chipmunked, to use that phrase. Man, this is going to become wildfire. This
I know.
is a
I need
new
to
slang term.
I need to figure out if there's a way to
Trademark it.
trademark
You need
that.
to
So I can get some
trademark
money
this.
on that because
You know?
I feel like this could be a Gen Z thing. Say, man, you just got chipmunks.
It's,
You know what I mean?
It's
Like
gonna be Gen
it's a
Alpha,
new
Alpha, man.
hashtag
Gen
chipmunky.
So, but I think that people can perceive that they're being chipmunked or
Okay.
being left out, pushed away, when really it's just a boundary that's being placed because whatever individual is out of prongs on their Lego board.
yeah.
So, to use your same illustration, you know, they don't have the capacity for one more relationship or to continue and engaging in those certain ways. And it's an opportunity that they just simply, to put it in your language that you kind of mentioned, it's an opportunity that they don't have margin for. And so they're trying to measure and prioritize the opportunities in front of them based on what God's called them and their capacity that God's given them. How do you weigh both of those things at the same time? Because oftentimes the sense of boundaries can conflict with our heart to want to welcome and engage everybody.
Yeah, I mean, I think that they're two separate messages, two separate illustrations. In one, in terms of Legos, I was talking about how many people can you really get close with, right? And some people have varying levels of capacity. Some are 6 Lego prong people, and some are like, you know, I'm just the solo. I can't handle that. So that was about like growing deep with people. This is more of like how you size up people, the people that you actually give time to, both in time and in terms of your it could be just superficial surface level attention, or even just some place of affection in your heart versus like writing them off with some negative sentiment or stereotype. So I wouldn't take yesterday's message saying that like every chipmunk needs to become your best friend and you grow deep with, and like all of a sudden now you have this massive, robust community of friends that you got the entire, you're now the Lego board that's got 100 pieces on it.
Yeah.
I'm trying to, in that situation, based upon even the parable that Jesus told of the Good Samaritan, look at the people that you won't even open yourself up to even like surface level friendship or getting to know them, versus just kind of stay away from them completely or continue to perpetuate the stereotype about maybe that type of people That to me is where the chipmunking is. It's not your unwillingness to like go deep in friendship, because there's always going to be capacity limits there. But just because you have a capacity limit doesn't mean that should then hinder kindness. Doesn't mean that shouldn't prevent you in those moments when you can do something, perhaps to consider doing something versus just writing it off based upon judgment or stereotypes or just like uncomfortability or unfamiliarity, like I mentioned yesterday. So I don't think that they go together. You still can only have so many chipmunks that you get deep with, so to speak, you know?
Yeah.
But you need to know who those chipmunks are, those people that make you feel uncomfortable, unfamiliar, and that you're unwilling to like even engage in conversation with. I don't think that's okay.
Because of judgmentalism,
yeah,
right? Because you're being a judgmental person.
Yeah, you're exercising like a hardness and callousness of heart in their direction, and it might not necessarily be valid to do so.
Now that word judgment, it's like a filthy word in today's culture, right? Like if you were a judgmental person, you might as well just called me like every name underneath the sun. Like I'm done for it. You just called me judgmental. But judgment can also be used to describe wisdom, using good judgment and knowing when something is dangerous, when something is detrimental, or when something is distracting. You know, when you are looking at not necessarily individuals, but maybe individuals in circumstances. You used a few different examples. You kind of talked about COVID. You talked about what...
I talked about COVID yesterday?
You said, remember when people... Didn't you?
No, that was 2 weeks ago.
I'm mixing messages. Man, they're all coming together in one big message. That's exciting. Okay, well, you talked about like...
You talked about the people, like the homeless people in the facility.
In the facility and things
people,
like that.
Like, those are the specific
when there might be actual dangers...
Sure.
You know, like how do you weigh, like, I'm not trying to chipmunk someone because I'm making a judgment on who they are as an individual, but I do have to use my wise judgment on how to make sure that other things are kept safe How do you kind of weigh those things in the balance?
I don't know if there's a catch-all answer for that. I think it's circumstantial, and each situation will determine what boundary needs to be in place. Different people have varying levels of comfortability and thresholds of risk that they are willing to actually take on. You know, so to try to explain this from just the example I did use yesterday, as far as the homeless individuals that frequent themselves here at Rice City Church, we moved into a place of humanity, right, where there are times where there's homeless individuals that were down and out and just like, man, life's throwing them curveballs and it stinks, right? It's just really hard. To then from humanity to like actual like safety because of drug use, that we had more and more people that were dealing drugs here on the property, that we had syringes and, we found crack pipes. And then we had a couple deaths based upon fentanyl overdoses and stuff like that. So in those realms, right? Like we started to say, okay, it's not chipmunking for me to put a fence up and say, there's a boundary here now because we're not okay. We are trying to prevent the drug, not the person, the drug. And we're still going to figure out ways, if possible, to be human with that human, whether it's offering services or still extending ways that, hey, we'll take you to places. I had someone ask me yesterday things that they could do to help in the situation. Like for a boundary for me, it's like I feel comfortable, and I wouldn't necessarily want my wife to do this. I will go and walk to those individuals and engage and have those conversations without someone else with me. And if they need a ride somewhere, get in the car with me. I would ask, in most situations, people have a pair, right? Just because you're not really sure what's going to happen. And maybe I am a little bit more old school. I think that the female should be probably escorted by another female or a male, only because that there's oftentimes that what can happen is I shouldn't say oftentimes, what could happen when someone's not in their right mind is unfortunately sometimes that women are looked at as more vulnerable and they get tried to take advantage of. And so I just feel like that it's important to have pairs. So, but even in those types of situations, right? I'm still, and you guys have heard me here talk about how do we still try to love that person?
Absolutely.
And I can't just quickly allow to chipmunk what I would say is to chipmunk that group is if I begin to allow a stereotype to develop in my heart that every homeless
All of
person
them fit.
deserves this, every one of them's drugged out, every one of them doesn't want to get help, blah, 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 blah. And then I shut my heart off now in the rest of my life to actually being engaged in helping people who are vulnerable and really need help. And that's the fear.
Well, I think the media helps with that, right? They give us a lot of accurate information about all the things that we should be afraid of and the groups of people that we should chipmunk. And man, but for real, like, I mean, with this inundation of media, with this, we're all overly informed and the information is questionable at best, oftentimes just straight up fake, right? And false. Man, how do you kind of weigh through that? How do you make sure that you're listening to the right things that help you value people and live wisely and continue to be compassionate and intervene in the correct ways that are going to be more of helps and they are hindrances? How do you really like weigh through all the different information? There's so many voices.
I would be fascinated listening to Anthony.
Yeah, so would I.
Because especially in working with teenagers who are... most of their information is coming by their social media algorithm.
Oh yeah.
You know, so how
I mean, they get their news from Facebook.
I'm sorry.
Facebook, dude, they're so old.
They get their news from TikTok.
They're not on Facebook.
Man, I just aged myself by like, I don't even know how.
They grill me when they find out I have a Facebook. So, yeah, I mean, great question. I think, well, I always encourage them to be direct, right? Like, know for yourself is kind of the language we always use. It. I mean, I think back to even my high school experience and like how many times there'd be a drama that was so blown up and so unnecessary. Like it'd be like I would start to chipmunk this person and avoid them because it's like, oh, they're so angry and they're gonna fight and they heard you did this and they're gonna do this, and it's all coming from outside sources. And then when you finally have that moment, it's like this heart beating intensity of like, are we about to fight or what's going on? And you meet and it's just like complete misunderstanding, totally blown out of proportion. And you start to hear like from the person directly and the source directly, and it's like, oh, this is not at all what it was made out to be.
Yeah.
And I think that it's the same thing with teenagers now because of the algorithm, and still their peers have just as much influence, if not more, than they ever have, because now they're not just getting their opinion of their peers, but they're getting their peers' opinion that's also shaped off their algorithm. So everyone's having these different things that they feel like are like hills they're willing to die on. So they're presenting it passionately when most of the time it just creates this like fog over the actual situation. So I see students start to chipmunk each other or chipmunk, I mean, not just each other, but also like even family at times, because they're like basing their idea off of what other people are saying instead of just being like, why don't you just talk to them about it? Why don't you just ask? Like one of the big things that I've noticed kind of a trend happening with high schoolers specifically is this idea that they know parenting better than their parents because someone on TikTok said it. Like just because you watch a 30-second video of someone saying, hey, you shouldn't let your parents tell you that you did bad in that game and that you could improve. Like you need to be your parents need to be supportive of you even when you're messing up and stuff like that. So then students take that, and instead of just going like, oh, my parents believe in me and they're like, they're proud of me, but they also know I can still grow and there's room for growth. They look at it and they go, oh, my parents, they're alienating me. They're not happy because I'm not.
I would imagine those videos are created by people who don't have kids.
Oh, for sure. It's always like a 17-year-old Tom. Like, what do you even know about parents?
Like,
what does that mean?
Because I know I could have made those videos when I was in high school.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And felt the same things. But now that you have kids, you're like, oh my gosh,
it's a different story. Yes.
Yeah.
Well, and then it creates this like they start to chipmunk, I guess, their parents in that, and it comes from this not even insecurity, but this false security of I know better than you, like. Yeah. Because of this, or even like with some of our kids who are just experiencing this life change, they almost start to. I love what you said yesterday about stepping into the shoes of other people.
Yeah,
because they talk to me about some things where I'm like, honestly, at times, like I'm like, come on, like you're already talking to them about stuff that feels way more personal and in depth than your faith. So why not just say, I'm not going to do that. I'm a Christian. Or God changed my life. And then putting myself in their shoes, it's like, oh, they're in the same boat that I was my freshman year of college or that second year of college. Like they don't feel like they're at a level to actually be taken seriously when it comes to their faith. So they shy away from it, not because they don't believe in God or the encounters that they have, but they'd rather chipmunk the people rather than go to them and say, I am a Christian, out of the fear of, well, what's that going to mean? Like, how are they going to follow up with that?
Gotcha.
Are they going to be supportive? Are they going to tear me down? Are they going to ask questions that I don't know the answers to? So it's easier for me to chipmunk them and just stay away from that situation completely than go into it without having complete knowledge and control of what's going to happen next.
Yeah. An intimidation factor in that too.
Oh, yeah.
And stepping out in that way. So, you know, you're younger. I look like I'm even younger than you. You know, just
Let's not flatter yourself.
right. Okay.
Where am I at in this? I mean, I wouldn't even brought in the conversation
No,
on you.
not at all.
Gosh.
You know, and I will say this
Not
too.
fair.
When I first got interviewed here, Brandon, one of your questions for me was, you know, what was some of your experiences here in like Santee, Lakeside area? And I shared with you one of my very first experiences actually in Santee back when I was in college, back in like 2002. Okay. You know, that tells you how old I am. Kind of.
I was 4.
You were 4?
So weird. Okay, but that blows my mind. 2002.
I'd have been like 22. Okay.
So really.
In 2002, I was born in 1980, so it's easy to do the math. Yeah.
Okay.
22.
All right. So like around that year. So you know, I guess we're about the I would have been 18.
What's your point, man?
Anyway, here's the point. Here's the point. Talking about agencies. I remember recounting with you about how I went to like the L&L barbecue here in Santee.
Oh yeah, I do remember the story.
And actually, my very first experience in Santee was someone came over by me. They kind of shoulder checked me, and they made a racial slur towards me about being Asian, right?
Yeah.
And so, obviously, chipmunked in that scenario in a very extreme degree. I'm sure at your age level and things like that too, and kids that you're working with, sometimes people will look down on people because they're youth, or they'll look at different people, or you know, look down on people because of their age when they're older and things like that too. What are some experiences that you have had, both of you, in being chipmunked yourself, and then how did that make you feel? Step into his shoes, you know?
I actually probably felt chipmunked most when I went to college. And it's because I grew up in a small farm town, and when I went to college, it was a larger demographic of people that were there, and a lot of the guys and even men and women were from kind of the Chicago suburbs. A lot larger, population, and also more diverse, and just kind of this air of like that people from small town, mid America are probably dumb, you know. And what do you know? You're so naive, and so I just remember kind of feeling like being on the outside in because I didn't have some Chicago suburb experience. And evidently, I just saw the world in such a small, kind of myopic, short-sighted vision,
okay.
and felt like I had to kind of earn the right of like, hey, I'm not stupid, but initially it was kind of like, yeah, what do you know, dude? Like you kind of got an little accent, and you
had an accent?
I mean, I was from Southern Illinois. You just hear my brothers talk.
Okay.
You
don't have an accent.
I don't have any more.
So like,
yeah,
wow,
I've been out, but yeah. So I think that was probably when I felt it most, and then a little bit, not a whole lot, but in ministry, I didn't initially get into ministry with kind of like, hey, I went to undergrad Bible college, then seminary, and this and that. Like I just started something that became a ministry and jumped in, and so there were people that had kind of went down like the official route to become a pastor, and so I was looked at as somebody that didn't have the pedigree. Or hadn't went through the right schooling initially to do what I was doing. And so I felt like my words and my decisions didn't hold as much weight initially. And now 23 years later, it's like, I don't feel that as much, but I felt like getting into it, like especially in church world, is like, you're good as a youth pastor, but other than that, like that's about all. Yeah. So yeah, well, you only are good to be a youth.
Man, for now, in 23 years though, I'll be fine.
You take my job, man.
So that's kind of your story too, though, right?
Yeah, I mean, and I'll touch on two again, just because I think it's important for people to know, and for my family who end up watching this for whatever reason, it's not personal anymore. But I will say,
Dion said it's personal.
I feel,
man.
yeah, exactly.
It's
personal. Don't make that guy mad.
I'm gonna put some shades on real quick.
I can think like one of the most impactful times I've been chipmunked in my life was kind of on a consistent basis. But when I was in high school, not making great decisions, I I have a big family, like lots of cousins, and so I was chipmunked by family fairly often because I was like far and wide the outcast, or kind of the different one than everyone else. I wasn't, like a 4.0 student who made the best decisions and was always like clean cut and presentable and just like so because of that, like I don't doubt that my family didn't love me or care about me, but I definitely felt and saw that I was being chipmunked at times, and so that was difficult for me. I think it also played a part in obviously who I am today, and also my experience with God changing my life, which is the second time I've been chipmunked. Is exactly what you said. I think not second time, multiple times, but I mean, I'm honestly still kind of there. Like being my age and in ministry is already a target for chipmunking in a lot of people's eyes, but also not just being my age and a pastor, but having the experience that I've had, or I guess in some people's eyes, the lack of experience I've had, because I didn't grow up in church and get 18 years of kids ministry and youth ministry on top of a biblical degree, and then now doing what I'm doing, because it happened like I got saved, then I went to college and got the degree, then got the job. Because it might not look like I have the experience that other people think, it's easy for them to chipmunk me and do exactly what you said and be like, well, he'll just be a youth guy, or he's just perfect for youth, or even if it's like I get opportunity outside of youth, like maybe the men's ministry, speaking at the men's retreat and stuff like that. Those are opportunities I don't take for granted, and I love when I get them. But then I start to find myself almost chipmunking myself because of other people chipmunking me, and I look at it and go, hey, maybe I am just a youth guy.
Yeah.
There's no way these men are going to like...
It's interesting you said the whole chipmunking myself, because that was someone who came up and prayed with me yesterday. That was something that she shared with me. She goes, I feel like that I am my own chipmunk. Like
that makes sense.
Constantly am writing myself off and dismissing who I am, and that God would even look to me, love me. And so I feel like I chipmunk myself.
But that's real. I think it's the repetition of being chipmunked. It can do that to you.
Sure.
It can change your mindset on how you view yourself when you're constantly kind of, I guess, experiencing that from the outside.
I mean, Robert, what does that look like for you? I mean, as somebody that in this sermon in general, right? Like, and if you look at even like the Good Samaritan, and the Good Samaritan being Jewish and Samaritans, and so there's a ethnicity-based prejudice that's existing in that passage.
Definite divide.
I mean, how have you worked through, and maybe it's different living in San Diego than it is somewhere else. I don't know, but I think, has that been something that's been hard for you and feel like that you've been on the outside looking in as someone that, is an Asian, or do you feel like, no, it's actually been just the opposite? I mean, what's the experience like for you?
It's different in every scenario.
Okay.
And it's different with every set or group of people, right? It's different in different circumstances. There's definitely been circumstances and groups of people that I've been around that I definitely feel on the outside, right? Where it's, maybe there's the whole like, oh, maybe they would like to eat this type of food or something. There's been legitimate like comments and conversations where I'm like, man, I feel really out of place in this situation and circumstance. There's been times when I've entered in, maybe not even just because of my race, but because, I'm younger or something like that, and entered into an older congregation, and then now I'm called to lead them, and that whole thing too. So, I mean, I've experienced it in different avenues and aspects. And then there's a lot of times when it's actually been almost what brought me in, which also feels weird. Right? When sometimes it's kind of like, no, we want to have you here because we need more diversity. And I'm kind of like, what if like God wants to use me more than like just being an Asian man? Right, what if God wants to use me for something different than just the
you're
fact
half
that
Mexican too?
Well, no, I'm not.
You're not?
Well, there's probably some Spaniard, Pedros, or I don't know. But
I thought that you were. My bad. I thought that you were both
Caucasian, but European, descent stuff. But
gotcha. Okay.
And so but either way, like for whatever, I know I can relate with both because I have a last name like Pedroza, so it helps out with that.
Okay.
Which means son of Peter.
Okay,
right?
we're not going to go there. Either way,
so weird.
Back on topic with this, but we're not going to go in that direction right now. It also feels weird to almost, and it's not just being tokenized. It's not even that thing. It's the sentiment of like we want to bring you in because we want to be more diverse, or we want to experience some different cultures, and we want to have those things. In some ways, I appreciate that people are leaning into that and trying.
That's kind of like them trying to step in your shoes.
It's really meaningful.
Right? Yeah.
I can really appreciate the heart behind it. I think that we need to be sensitive and careful about how we do it. So we make sure that people don't feel like we're only valuing them because they're different than us. But rather we actually value them because they are a person.
Yeah.
And we value their differences because we're interested in the individual that they are. Because we actually want to find out more about who they are and who God made them to be and what they can teach us, because maybe they have some different experiences, but also maybe because they've had the same experiences and they have a different insight and perspective because of what the Holy Spirit's doing in their life, just like any other person.
Yeah. And that's so, the Holy Spirit, like your last point, I don't remember exactly what it is, but like you said, we're dealing with people.
Yeah.
Like the chipmunk is the illustration, but when you're in the business of people, every single person is different and unique. Even if we went through the exact same experiences, we're going to respond to them probably differently in different ways, which is going to shape us in different ways. And I read a commentary on this a while back too that I just read again because I was thinking about it after you said it yesterday. And it says the question that we need to ask ourselves to shift our perspective in this is not who is a neighbor, but who needs a neighbor. Like, how do I take initiative when I look at that chipmunk? How do I set aside my fear or my insecurity to like look past any of that and say, what is it that you need and how can I help? And that's what I loved about kind of your last point, talking about the Holy Spirit and being Spirit led through that, even is like, you will get opportunity to impact people that you can miss and you will miss if you get in this constant state of chipmunking things because it's not perfect.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I mean, I think if you're asked like, hey, what is your overall point yesterday, and where I felt like God really kind of drove this home inside of my own heart with that experience with the chipmunk was, it's just seeing the pervading divisiveness in our culture and the kind of the latent, but also at times like it becomes very overt and direct based, like fear that's there, and trying to move past those things that divide us, that politicize us, that constantly try to tell us that different is something to be feared versus at times something to lean into, to learn from, and maybe embraced.
Yeah.
It's also saying that like just because something's different or someone practices and does or espouses something that's different doesn't mean you have to like espouse the exact same things and believe the same things. But if we are unwilling to ever like engage in that, I don't think that's Christ-like. And if we as Christians, right, like who house the living God within us, there should be something different about us. Like we should expect, one, to be chipmunked by other people because we're just different. But number two, like, why wouldn't there be something about us that causes people to like want to lean in and find out like, what is that about you? And if we are letting ourselves get saturated with fear, if we're letting ourselves get algorithmed to divide, if we're letting ourselves have these things happen, we are missing big time opportunities to not just help people in front of us for tangible needs, but ultimately to use our words and our lives to promote the gospel of Jesus Christ, which is the ultimate source of hope and healing for everybody.
Yeah.
And I think that's where I don't want to chipmunk anybody because I want everybody to come to know the gospel of Jesus Christ. And then, so I think that's my heart. And I think that more than anything, I wasn't trying to tell people, like, say, you need to have more relationships with lots of people, or like get on a call, make 10 calls this week, and those 10 phone calls better represent different, race backgrounds or gender. Just be present with the people that come across your path right now in life, and don't disengage, but engage and see what God does through that.
Yeah, we need to be informed by love and Christ's heart more than we are by fear and what would divide us.
Yeah,
that's good, man.
Yeah, I tell students all the time, you cannot love God and not love people.
The way that you do love God is how you love people.
Exactly.
That's what he says,
And I think because of our own experiences being chipmunked, we can let bitterness kind of take root, and so we avoid people.
Yeah.
And that's keeping you from your purpose, that's keeping you from growth and opportunity. It's keeping you from being able to have stories like some of the ones we've shared on this podcast over the past, months. I thought it was great overall, and I loved just the imagery at the end of, which by the way caught me off guard. But you get to the top and you look around and there's people feeding chipmunks everywhere. Oh, this chipmunk is not. I thought it was the perfect ending to it too, and even just going back to the symbolism, I thought to myself like, what if as a community we were not chipmunking people, but we were engaging them where they are. Like what would that mountaintop, the end of that?
I would
path
love
look like
for
for
Rise
us?
City Church to be the place that people get to the top of the
Yeah.
mountain and be like, look,
we're loving
they're
people.
loving
Yeah.
and feeding all types of people there.
Yeah.
And
Absolutely.
that would be an amazing just kind of expression of love for this church.
Let's get there.
So,
Let's do it.
all right.
With your sneakers, man, those are some pretty stylish there.
Pretty loud
so.
kicks. Yeah.
Yep.
I saw you carrying them through the office before, and I thought to myself, what is he up to? Like, what is going on right now?
What is
You know,
he gonna do?
you know what the funny thing is? We can close with this, but like,
Yep.
I did that illustration 4 years ago. I've had those shoes for 4 years. I did it here at Rise City, and I have had no one yet remember it. So I was like,
Your daughter did.
well, yeah, my daughter, because she's seen the shoes in my closet for like 4 years. But what's funny is just like, when you think that like you're giving this amazing message that people are always going to remember, there's
forget.
moments of humility. When people yesterday were like, oh, you bought those shoes at Goodwill like recently? I was like, no, 4 years ago. Like,
there you
glad
go.
you remembered. Glad you remembered.
funny.
It's okay.
So,
They got to
Yeah.
step into your shoes for a little bit
they
too.
did.
So
They did. Way to bring that home.
yep. Well, thank you so much for joining us on another episode of Digging Deeper. I trust that you are benefited and blessed by it. We'll see you next time.
See you later.